What do you do to help yourself relax? Do you go outside and explore nature? If you're a dog like Bumble, who you can see here, then it's not about relaxation. It's out. Being outside is about having fun, finding new smells, and exploring. Being curious about what new stones he can find on the water's edge. But let's go back to this stone and the sound that you heard of the water. Is it the rhythm of the waves that relaxes you? Is it just the sound, or is it the vibration? If we're looking at the waves as well as hearing them, does it relax us more? What do you think? Please comment. It's another curiosity for me. See these little beaches? I've walked across a couple of these on my way over. They're fairly sandy, and I'm actually sat on one here. You can see there's actually like a small fine gravel, and there are a number of these. Can you see it? This is, I believe, a Canadian goose feather. Now, I have been looking for a Canadian goose feather for quite some months now, and it just so happened to appear today, which I thought was quite beneficial to me. It means I can finally make my bee brush, because the bees who are now becoming busy, and that means the honeybees, on the warmer days, they often come into my van as I'm travelling around, and having a feather to lift them, to help them go outside, is far much more gentle than using a glass or a piece of paper. Today I'm actually curious about, am I going to wander around the whole lake? I didn't see anything that said this is how long it will take, although I have got most of the day before it gets dark to wander around with Bumble. But Bumble has to stay on the lead for a number of reasons. This belongs to Southwest Water, or Southwest Water Lakes, and no dogs off the lead here. So he's feeling a little bit rambunctious because he wants to be off the lead in the water and he wants to be digging. So there's a number of things that Bumble wants to do, but I'm currently stopping him from doing. So he's not the happiest dog in the world, and it often ends up with him tug, 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 and the phone starts bobbing as I'm trying to record, which you may see the movement and wonder, what is she doing? Is it really windy? Was she walking along? Well, it is really windy here, and I'm not walking, I'm sat on a piece of granite at the moment on the shore side, but I am attached to a rambunctious dog. This was the lovely stone that I sat on for a while, and it was relatively dry, and this is my beautiful stuff, which is made out of alder. That's A-L-D-E-R, and alders like to be by the water, and that's something that Bumble and we like to be by the water, whether it's natural water or the sea water. And actually, I don't mean natural water, do I? I mean non-salt water. like lakes and rivers and streams and waterfalls, all that beautiful energy of the water moving. You'll find these granite outcrops all over Bodmin Moor. And Bodmin Moor is where we are today because we came to visit, you can see the cars over there, Cauldron, which is a maze. Now, I didn't video whilst I was in the maze because it's surprisingly busy in there today. One of the reasons that it's busy is because it was on the internet. So a number of newspapers covered the fact that Cauldron is open. It's a Cornish maze made out of Cornish hedging. But it's partial Cornish hedging and there's some small trees in there. And they are looking for sponsors to help contribute towards the building and the supply of the stone. And you can have your mini plaque in there if you want to sponsor, or you could even put the name of your grandchildren or your children if you wanted to have a spot with their name on for history, or you could have your company name, I guess, because we as people do like to be remembered, don't we? Now this leads me on to another curiosity. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but on a number of occasions when I'm out and about, I will meet people, strangers, and they share stories. And they tell me things about their current life. It might be they share a problem that they're experiencing. And it makes me wonder what it is that I might learn from what they're telling me on that particular day. So I'm going to tell you about one lovely man I met. Now, when I first saw this gentleman, he was walking around the roundabout crossing, and I thought, oh, he's a little bit unsteady on his feet, and I was quite worried about whether he was going to get across without falling over. He did have a stick, but he just wasn't walking upright. You know, that thing that we all take for granted, the ability to be able to stand on our feet and stay upright. Although I often find I struggle to stay upright because I've got this dog called Bumblebee with me who does like to pull. And I'm sure somebody one day is going to comment about the fact that I've got this bad-mannered dog attached to me, and what have I done about it? So just to interject here, Bumblebee has had numerous dog lessons and dog training, and he came out with certificates, you know, best in class, wonderful dog. He went up to the higher level and he graduated from dog training school. But what Bumblebee does, and I do actually sympathise with him, is on some days he is like the girl with a curl. When he's good, he's very, very good. But when he's not, he's rather naughty. And I think he enjoys being naughty. So, going back to John. I didn't mention his name, did I? So this man, he's called John, because he told me his name was John. And he was crossing the roundabout. And I was driving round the roundabout because I decided I was going to treat myself to a little trip to Costa. And in I went, bought my coffee, and then John appears, or the man who I'd seen crossing the roundabout. And I asked him, I said, I'm glad you made it safely. And he smiled and thanked me for my interjection. And he then went off and, you know, bought whatever he was going to buy for his tea. So a little while later, he stood up and he was wandering around Costa a little bit. And I said, are you okay? And he said, I've lost my walking stick. So I thought I'd go and help. And one of the girls that worked in Costa found his walking stick. And I suggested that if he put a little bit of coloured tape on it, it might be easier to find if he lost it. And then John I didn't know his name at the time, but John came over and said, could he come and sit with me? And I said yes. And then John told me some of his story. John lives alone in the town that I was visiting, Costa. And he told me about, first of all, this rhododendron bush that he has, which comes from an island in Japan, and it's from the mid-level. And John said this particular rhododendron is quite hardy because it's not too close to the top, but it can cope with the cold, and it's nice and compact because it isn't in the warmer part of this island. And the island, he said, is like a mountain with these rhododendron bushes growing on, and it has a white flower. So I thought that was something interesting that I could go and have a look for. Then John was saying he didn't know what he was going to do because he knew that he was getting quite close to the end of his days, so he was feeling quite low about that, and who was going to take good care of his rhododendron. So we had a chat around who could he get advice from. And I knew that there was a place in Cornwall called Anthony House, which is linked to the National Trust, and they have a number of rhododendron trees there. So we had a chat about how he could contact the National Trust and ask for guidance to see if their gardener could give him some help with his rhododendron bush and what to do in the future with it, especially if house sold and somebody else took over. Then we started talking about what else John had in his garden, and it transpires that John was a gardener at Lambeth Palace for the Archbishop of Canterbury, and so he had quite a career working for the church and living in London. And when he retired, he had to give up his tied house, which is when he and his wife decided to move towards Cornwall and the town that they live in, which is lovely. And he's obviously used his skills with his garden. And he's also a frequent visitor to some of his local garden centres. And John told me how he went to one of the garden centres where they had a cafe, and they also had a piano, which he asked if he could play it. And he looks at me and he said, I thought I'd sit down. He said, and I tested my fingers out, and then I thought I would play a little bit of Schubert. So there he was, this seemingly lost gentleman who was an extraordinary person with his gardening background and his ability to play the piano beautifully, because he pleased many people in the cafe that day. And I asked him, will you be going back to play again? And he said, yes, if the customers don't mind, I'd like to go back. The other thing that John shared with me was that he loved taking photographs, and he often liked to catch the sunset at particular places in town. Or he said how the light was particularly good in some of the graveyards or the churchyards, depending on how you like to term them. So, taking a leaf out of John's book, I'm going to go and investigate a few of those churchyards and have a look and see what they look like when the light is changing. Because I'm always curious about how the light changes what we're doing. Now, I've got one thing just to interject. As I mentioned, I'm at Cauldron, and Bumblebee and I were walking around trying to have a moment of peacefulness as we were walking and make the most of being in a maze. And a little boy with his grandparents walked past, and he looked at us and he pointed and said, "Cat." And his granddad said, no, that's a dog. But the little boy was convinced there was a cat with us. So I did wonder, I am curious, is Paddy wandering around and was visible to the little boy? And Paddy was a ginger cat that used to live with me before he passed over and crossed the Rainbow Bridge. So a few things to think on there. If you have any comments and you would like to ask any questions or give me any feedback, please do, because I would be interested to know your thoughts. And we're just going to walk along the lake a little bit further and see what else we can find and what else to be curious about. Have a look at this area here with the granite and where the water moves through the marsh grass and the tree, and another large piece of granite, quite a boulder, moving out to the lake. I'm going to zoom in to the tree. Can you see? It's in flower. There we go. Look at those buds coming through. Absolutely gorgeous. The white and the purple tips bobbing in the wind. Which is one of the reasons I was unable to take a photograph of them. I've been looking for where the flowers are coming out because it does interest me. Where the flowers are, there's pollen for the honeybees and the insects to feed from. So this tree has got a bit of moss over it, and you can see I put Bumble over there because he was insistent on going after various holes and would not allow me to focus on the flowers. So let's have a look at this tree. So I'm going to put my hand behind it, and that allows me to focus in on the buds. Beautiful, aren't they? And this tree is on its own on this part of the hedge. And there's some moss hanging off there. Look at that. It's really quite soft. You could use all of these things in your natural herbalism. Look them up. One of the reasons I take a stick like my alder stick with me is because I do get curious and I wanted to walk across this area here, and the marsh grass would indicate that the ground's quite soft and you can see where the sheep have indented. So having a strong and sturdy stick allows you to walk across areas that maybe you might sink a little bit into, but it tests the ground. But I love how the hedges have different platforms. Sometimes it feels like nature's created all these curious paths for us to be able to walk around. Look at this. I'm going round the tree, and you could climb up and over the top. I just love the curious paths, the crooked paths that we can follow. And these are sometimes formed by water, sometimes they're created by animals, by fox or badgers, and we can follow in their footsteps, which is why Bumble gets quite excited because he can smell that they've been there before. Here's another curious find. Can you see what that is? So that is bone tucked away, and there's another bit of a leg bone there. So a poor sheep has at some point passed away here and then degraded and has been absorbed back into the earth. And look here, there's another bit of the sheep. And you sometimes see this in areas where they're a little bit more remote, and we can see the sheep's teeth. Let's have a closer look. Can you see that? Just showing you a close-up of what the sheep's teeth look like. And Bumble's obviously having a sniff of it, despite the fact that there isn't actually anything there for him to eat. And there we have the sockets that have been filled with debris. You can see markings based on how long it's been here. I'm just going to turn it over so you can see where the nose part is. It's just quite a long stretch, isn't it, with those finer bones at the top. I've come over here because the gorse, the marsh grass and the hedges here have created their own maze. Can you see where you could, if you're smaller, move through and play? This would be a perfect place for children running around. And you can see, well, there's different choices, different paths to go. Well, there's a few brambles there, so maybe not in that middle bit, unless you're a rabbit, because you'd be able to go down underneath. And you can see where Bumble's sniffing is where a rabbit has most likely moved through. And the birds will be hiding from him. Not that he can do anything about it. So we're going to move here, and you can see secret hiding places amongst the gorse. If you want to stay there out of the wind, the gorse is perfect for that, isn't it? And then you have the shelter that's created by the wall here, the low wall with grass and moss. I'm going to show you, this is where you could go in to hide from the wind. So you could tuck yourself in there if you had to, if it is particularly bad weather. There was a place in Wales where I actually did use the gorse bushes to break the wind and allow me to have a moment so I could have a hot drink. Let's zoom in so you can see there. And you can see where an animal has been chewing the gorse wood on the inside. And there we have the sheep wool attached to a bramble hanging off. So the sheep have been in there using it as well, haven't they? You'll notice there is a bit of blueness in the sky. And I'm going to go over and visit the trees. Can you see there is moss on there? Again, can you see that? Look at that, beautiful, isn't it? Look at the patterns. I'm always curious about the patterns that nature creates. That's absolutely beautiful, isn't it? For different colours. You can see why people have created fabrics reflecting nature. It's all out there for us to see. We just have to be curious and go out and look for it. And here are a few more buds. Beautiful, aren't they? You can see the colour. These have got a green tip, and then their pinkness is on the lower side. And you can see the thorn with greenery coming off the thorns as well, but that looks like it might be a bit of moss coming off there. Yeah, look at that. Beautiful. I'm trying to focus here on one of the hawthorn haws next to the bud behind it. Oh, look at that. it's finally come in, beautiful. So these two trees are together on the hedge, and they're creating a gateway between them, are those gorgeous hawthorns. There's thorns showing and the leaves. Many years ago, people would eat these young leaves on a hawthorn as part of their spring diet. I mentioned the gateway between the two hawthorns, which entices you to pass through the middle and maybe weave your way in a figure of 8. When you look at this, is there anything that you feel that you want to do? Come and have a closer look, or follow the hedge line? What does it make you think? I wanted to show you another little pathway. Can you see this one? Up through the gorse bush and up the hedge. Essentially, I'm following paths that make me curious. And I look up there, and I did think about it, but there's quite a few brambles on that section, so I think I might give it a miss. But there is a lovely hawthorn at the top. And there's another one of those gorse bushes that's got like a cave of protection in it. Shall we have a closer look and see if we can see inside? Wow, look in there. Can you see that? There's like a badger set there. Amazing. And then let's see if we can capture some of the beauty of those wonderful gorse flowers. Oh, look at those. That's gorgeous, isn't it? I wonder who walks up and down there to eat the grass at the top. Unfortunately, one of those people who likes to leave their rubbish behind has been here. I didn't bring a rucksack with me to carry the rubbish that I might find, because I really did not think I would find rubbish over here, because it's quite some way from the main road, so you don't get the sort of rubbish that gets thrown out of people's cars here. But I'm guessing that with the arrival of the maze and people visiting and no bins, people are going to start leaving their rubbish behind. What do you think? Why don't people take responsibility for their own rubbish? I'm just getting closer to this bit of rock here. You see the colours there. Pinks and white. A huge lump of quartz that's got moss on it still, and you've got the redness. Is that from the metal veins that are going through it? I wonder what metal is causing that colour. Is it tin? If there's any geologists watching who might comment on what you think this rock is. This area here is perfectly sheltered from the wind at the moment, and you can see these hillocks that are perfect places to sit down on, aren't they? You could come here because there's lots of hillocks here for you to sit on to have your picnic. I wonder how many people have sat here in the past and gathered out of the wind and shared stories about who they are and where they've come from. It's been a pleasure sharing a few curious thoughts with you, and I hope that you feel welcome when you're listening at the Cauldron of Curiosities. If you have any questions, please go to info@thedandelion.moon.co.uk and send any messages that you would like to send to me, and I will do my best to answer you as promptly as possible.